Welcome back, Kerbal, to this special episode. So today, in real life as well as in this episode, we launched the InSight probe. So the InSight probe was a lander, is a mission that was just launched towards Mars on May 5th, which happens to be the day I'm recording this, and hopefully the day I release this. We're going to talk a little bit about how it's put together. This is obviously a Kerbalized version of the spacecraft, but it's a fairly close approximation. I'll talk about some of the differences. So, I guess this is as zoomed in as I can get. We have it enshrouded, which makes it a little bit different. We have an accelerometer in here. The way that's similar to InSight is it will detect the vibrations of the surface of the planet, which will allow us to better tell what's inside of it. So they use some kind of an accelerometer to do that. We have a gravity detector, which won't work as well, isn't really that similar to the instruments on InSight, but it's the same kind of thing. It's used to probe the interior. We have a temperature probe, the too hot thermometer, and what this will do is allow us to talk to the spacecraft when it is to measure the temperature. They're going to measure the temperature of the inside, but we'll get a fairly good idea. I just realized something. We also have an antenna here. This antenna is representing a probe. You can't see how far it goes down. Well, you can there. That is going to be sent into the surface of Mars. It's going to dig about, hopefully, 5 meters, so about 16 feet into the surface. We have a semi-realistic descent engine, so we have some of the drogue chutes, and this can be fired off, as will actually happen with InSight. And we have a cruise stage here on the top. Now, what I just realized is we need a cruise antenna. Which one should we put? We'll just put this one. That's too big. 15G. It's probably not big enough. How about this one? There we go. So that antenna will be able to talk back to Kerbin. So that should be good. Now, there was also a couple of CubeSats that are sent called the Marco sats. I think one of them should be named Marco and one of them should be named Polo, but maybe that's just me. But I'm not going to model those. It's too hard to model a CubeSat in this game. So let's go ahead and launch. And now we wait for the screen. So I'm going to attempt to do a polar launch, which is how InSight was actually launched. Let's see here. We're not really at the optimal angle, so I'm going to revert to the vehicle assembly building, and I'm going to connect an umbilical to it, which will allow us to charge the spacecraft while it's on the ground. Because otherwise, this thing will run out of batteries. Not that. It's just a ladder. Launch escape system. I have never actually played with one of those. I should do that someday. It's not going to be payload, maybe structural. Yeah, here we go. So we'll put 3 of these on just for good measure. I don't know how many the Atlas rocket uses, but it's probably 4. But I'm too lazy to change this. Okay. So now it can actually be charged and it can remain on the launch pad. Real spacecraft often have a kind of phantom drain where when they're in flight configuration, the flight computer will be running all the time, and so they'll have a limited amount of time that they can wait on the ground. This is actually not that tall of a rocket. Okay, so in order to do this right, we need to line up with the orbital line, which you just saw fade away. It's a pity. Wait. Let's see. Yeah, this is pretty close. We'll give this a shot, and we're going to need to go in this direction. So we can go either north or south. Let's go ahead and go south. And tell you what, I'm going to reverse the order. So we're going to start firing the engine just like they really do. Check off and launch of the Mars InSight mission, used to give Mars its first health checkup in 4 billion years. It's more or less the tagline that they said. I found it amusing, to say the least. Actually, we're this way. South, not north. Never mind my little kick-up. I would never, ever do something as silly as going the wrong direction. So this is a little bit more powerful than Atlas, but that's okay. Now we still have some orbital velocity. This is a less efficient way in general to do things because we have some, just by nature of being on the planet, we have a little bit of horizontal velocity because we're on the equator. The InSight mission was unique that it was launched into a mostly polar orbit before firing on the trans-Mars injection burn. So this was unique. It was done on the west coast, and normally you'd fly straight east, but they weren't going to fly a rocket over Los Angeles. Not a good idea. Not a very good idea at all. I'm actually... Whoa. Haha. I'm going way too vertical. So we'll get this better aimed. That's what I get. I need more flying and less talking. It's an easy problem to have. For those of you who've never tried to record one of these videos, try it once. It's a very interesting challenge to be able to talk. Even if you don't actually record it, just try talking your way through it and see how many mistakes you make. Okay, so we have separation. Now the Atlas mission actually has some little rockets that will separate it out. We're using something more similar to the Falcon that uses springs. We're going to go ahead and deploy the aeroshell. Oof, that's a nice push there. Okay, now let's go ahead and wait until we're a little bit closer. Of course, the real mission didn't do this, but this is Kerbal. Kerbal is much, much smaller than Earth, and so it is able to do this. And plus, I flew in a less than optimal trajectory. My bad. Okay. Looking good. Looking very good. Now, time to Apoasis is growing, which means we're basically guaranteed to achieve orbit. We'll go straight horizontal, as long as we don't run out of fuel, and we have plenty of fuel. Now, I'm really hoping I can get this nailed perfectly. Although, to be honest, this is not my first attempt at doing this. Getting the right timing for the burn is extremely difficult. When you have simulations, it's much easier to do this in real life in a lot of ways. Well, you could do it in Kerbal Space Program, the same way they do it in real life. You could do a simulation to get your timing nailed exactly and do all kinds of math, but who wants to do that? If you want to do math, then, actually work for NASA. Where are we? Actually, okay. Am I? No, I'm not. So I'm gonna go ahead and get my, Now I'm in orbit. Good. So, what do we do now? How well does my orbit align with... that's actually pretty decent. That's not bad. It's not bad at all. So I think we're going to need to fire about here. I took a little bit too long to orbit. And let's set Juna as our target. So we're going to have to wait for one orbit to have our timing set just right. That's about the right. Okay. But you see it's really inclined, which means this needs to happen a little bit earlier. We have a reasonably close approach. Cool. Now let's see here. Descending node is fine. Welcome back. So I've decided that what we're going to do, first of all, we need to deploy some solar panels. We're only going to deploy the crew stage panels. Notice that there's two separate sets of solar panels, but one of them is just for the lander. So the antenna, of course, is already included. And what we're going to do is we're going to get this as good as we can get it. Sorry for the jumping around. See, the problem is we didn't quite have a perfect orbit. It was close, but it's not perfect. So because of those little imperfections, then we don't have an optimal burn. That's okay, though. We'll figure out a way to make this work. So what we're going to do is do some deep space corrections, and I'll probably put another quick pause in here. Once we get to that, which of course we're not there yet. So we need to start the burn at about 38 seconds before, maybe 37. The real InSight would have gone straight along this line, but you notice that it's almost perfectly flat, so it really doesn't matter that much that we took the inclination. We're just losing the speed boost that we would have otherwise received had we launched straight east. And it makes it much more complicated. This is much harder to do with Kerbal Space Program, as I think I've said. So you notice that the thrust required here was a little bit more too. That's okay though. If we run out of thrust, then I will just cheat a little bit because this is not my career mode. We've got our engine firing, we've got sun setting on the planet. Look at how dark that is. In the Starman images, you could see the Earth a lot of time at nighttime, but this is how it looked. It looked completely dark. And we have cutoff. So I'm going to keep this second stage on and use it to do the correction burn. That's only needed because we didn't have a perfect launch. So let's go ahead and add a maneuver. Let me get this right. Okay. So that's going the wrong direction. It's off a little bit in the descending node, but we'll probably, yeah. Okay, we're getting there. About a little bit slower. Okay, we're almost there, so I'm just gonna keep getting this figured out. Yeah. Look at how inefficient, though. I'm having to do this huge burn because I didn't nail the approach from the beginning. We have the fuel, but tell you what, let's just go ahead and do that. No, I'm gonna focus on Duna. And we'll get it into a much better path. That'll be pretty close. Okay, we'll go ahead and there we go. We'll go ahead and just get outside of the Kerbal system so that our maneuver nodes work properly. Or not maneuver nodes, our wait time. It takes us several days to pass outside. Okay, let's go ahead and, well, all right. Now we can do our warp to the next maneuver, target our maneuvering node, and we just kick off the engines at the right time. Although, to be honest, this one hardly matters, so I'm just going to go ahead and do it. Hope we have enough fuel. Yeah, we have plenty of fuel. We have plenty of fuel. Now, InSight launching from the west coast caused it to have some, not quite to this same extent, but it was fairly similar extra burns that it had to do, no doubt. And it had a 2-hour launch window, but it had plenty of fuel to overcome this, just like we had plenty of fuel to overcome our less than optimal launch window. So, having extra fuel is always a good thing. Yeah, can I... You know what? We're going to call that good enough. All right, so we could dispose of this upper stage now. And we will before we get to Mars, but I'm going to use it to do a correction burn, even though that's not how things really would work. It's a minor detail. Oh, good. What's that periapsis? A little bit out. I'm going to target about 25. Yeah, that'll be close enough. Okay, target our maneuvering node. And we will wait till our next maneuver, and then we will be on our direct intercept course. Now, how a real Mars mission works is the upper stage would deposit them into something like the orbit that we're in now, where it'll kind of fly close by Mars, but not really. And it'll have the spacecraft correct itself to be right on target. But we're not going to do things quite that way because... Actually, we could. It's only a couple meters per second change, but... Yeah. Not that big of a deal. Yeah. You know what? It'll be fine. We have a heat shield. We have parachutes. We'll survive. All right. So next stop, let's stay in this view. Let's just warp straight. Well, at this point in time, we're gonna ditch our upper stage. Oh, I guess that was the aero shell. So you can see landing legs cut off. Haha, it happens. When they deploy, it'll be fine. But the heat shield is actually going to be thrown away. You see that we're going to do things like a real Mars mission lands. And the way a real Mars mission lands, it has a heat shield, slows things down. It has parachutes that also help. And then it has a little rocket burn to keep the last little bit to slow it down. We have a capability to adjust things as well via we have the ability to talk it through the antenna. So this cruise stage will come off once we get close, but it's needed to facilitate communication because the lander doesn't have that ability. So let's go ahead and warp. We would hit Ike if we continued, but we're obviously not going to be able to. So far, we're doing really well. One interesting tidbit with the InSight mission is no matter what day they'd launch, they were aiming to get to Mars the Monday after Thanksgiving, which November 25th, I believe it is. And did a lot of talking with people through the internet, and we kind of come to the assumption that they just wanted to plan it around a holiday because the first 30 days after landing are pretty busy. So they figured they may as well try to schedule that at the time where it'd be least impactful. Now we have entered the hill sphere. Oh my. This is not good. So we need to burn radial out. I'm trying to remember how to do. Oh, we have to turn on RCS. I think what's going on? Oh, we have communication. You have RCS turned on. Why? Oh, there we go. So we're using RCS to just gently nudge this. RCS is a monopropellant, so it's actually kind of realistic how that would work. Whoops. There we go. We'll turn off the RCS. And we'll ditch the cruise stage about here. All right, so we are now go for Mars insertion. We thank the cruise stage for its valuable contribution, but your time is done. Now we are in for the landing configuration. Ooh boy. We'll target towards retrograde, although we don't have any... we have zero ability to control things on here. Well, that'll be interesting. That'll be really interesting. That was a minor mistake. Whoops. Yeah, they would have a little bit of RCS to control that. Okay, let me just check the... Oh, I should have put the drogue chutes in a different stage. Now, I didn't actually check to see if the number of parachutes lines up with what the real InSight mission will do, but I figure that's a pretty minor detail. Okay, we are now officially entering the atmosphere. This is exciting. We're going to land on Mars or Duna. I'm hopeful that this will achieve a kind of stability in the right direction naturally. Hey, how about that? This is going to be stable about the right spot. Because the way that the drag works, it's going to point in the right way. This is why we have the capsule design, and this is actually reasonably close to what InSight will look like when it's getting into Mars. Now it'll have a little bit more power, but to control itself. But it's not bad. Not bad at all. How are we looking? Looking pretty good. So once we've slowed down enough, then we can deploy the drogue chutes. And that will help to orient us correctly. And it will also help to slow us down. This is the same way that pretty much all Mars landers have done things. There's some little hiccups like the whatchamacallit, the Curiosity rover is doing things a little bit differently with the sky crane landing. I think the Mars 2020 rover is doing the same thing. Well, we're definitely landing. Huh. I guess we picked exactly the right altitude. So the relay is the first stage. It somehow managed to survive, which is good because it's providing communication for us. Similar to the Marco satellites, or as I like to call Marco and Polo. Okay, we can fire the drogue chutes now. Now they're actually based on the air pressure when they'll deploy, so I guess it really doesn't matter that much. Actually, I forgot to convert the spacecraft to a proper Mars landing. You need to slow down a little bit higher altitude. And then the drogue chutes would be... I should have the drogue chutes fired now. So one of them's gone. Good. Hopefully this will help to stabilize the spacecraft some. Although it's only partially opened. There we go. Now all four of those will give us much more stability. Now we have one fully open. So let's go ahead and deploy the other ones. And we can jettison our heat shield now. Oh dear, that blew our engine up. Whoops. Should have waited for a more stable landing, I suppose, but that's okay. Unlike the real mission, we will not do a powered landing. I just hope parachutes are sufficient. They're not really. So the reason why they do a powered landing is they don't want the parachutes to get tangled up in the instruments. Because there's no one to cut the parachutes. So how I was originally planning on doing this is at this point in time, we were going to jettison the parachute and let it fly off on its own. We'll do that once we get to the surface just to kind of show. But we're not gonna be able to do that for the landing, unfortunately, because our engine decided to blow up. Whoops. Lesson learned. NASA and especially the Russian space agency, Soviet space agency, they learned an awful lot about how to properly land things on the red planet, and they did a lot of this through trial and error. And these landing legs, they'll be able to absorb some of the blow, although we're pretty near the maximum speed that they can actually do this, although this isn't a real mission, so I might just allow it to to work anyways. I guess if we had deployed the heat shield at this point in time, then it would have fallen straight nice and left a little crater, but that's okay. Yeah. Whoops. Wow, that had a lot of force. And can I deploy the antenna? No? This antenna was notoriously difficult to select, and I probably put the wrong part on. Oh, lovely. Anyways, good enough for this purpose. This is my little representation of the Mars InSight probe. We can get the science of finding the temperature, log some temperature. We can get the gravity. We can look for earthquakes. And we have, if we landed the right way, we have a little probe that we would stick into the surface to determine some of the interior properties of Duna. So, anyways, congratulations to the Mars InSight team on the successful launch of Mars InSight, and hopefully we'll learn many, many great things from it once it actually gets to Mars. And